Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is, of course, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you. And I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Speaking of thoughts, here are Sean Payton's regarding today's joint practice with the San Francisco 49ers.
Overall, I was pleased with the work we got, and both sides, I thought, handled themselves well. It was competitive, and yet, we got a ton of situational work, 2-minute red zone, third down, a lot of teamwork. So a lot of players getting a lot of work.
And that's the first thing, right? I think Sean Payton is far more concerned with the amount of reps and the amount of work, the different looks that his team is getting. I don't know if his team getting the better of the 49ers is at the top of his mind or his primary concern, but it is yours. So it seems like for Sean Payton's top priority, he got out of this practice what he wanted. As far as what you want, here's the general consensus. Broncos defense gave Brock Purdy and company all the problems they could possibly face, which is to be expected. I remember one of the joint practices last year with the Denver Broncos, and it was when they went up against the Green Bay Packers. And the story of that joint practice around this time last year was this Broncos defense gave Jordan Love and the Packers offense a lot of fits. So it wasn't until later when the Broncos started to rotate some guys in that the 49ers started to find some success. I think just reading up on things, it appears that really the only success that the 49ers offense had, 1-versus-1s, was, those little dump-off passes to Christian McCaffrey. But that's what you expect, right? You expect the Denver Broncos defense, who has gotten the better and given all the problems to the Broncos offense so far in camp, you would certainly expect them to be able to translate that going up against another team's ones. And I like San Francisco. I'm not done with them yet. We'll get into one of the things we're doing today is going through the NFL divisions where I think teams will finish. I think the 49ers are going to have a good year. But if you ask me to predict who would win between the 49ers offense and the Denver Broncos defense, I would tell you the Broncos defense. I think they are going to be arguably the best in the NFL this season. Really, it's on the other side that is of more interest, right? I mean, let's be honest. If all the reports coming out of California today where, wow, Brock Purdy really tore up the Broncos defense, that would be notable. I think the Broncos defense at times dominating the 49ers offense, that's what you expect. What about the offense? Here's Sean Payton on that, because that was the field he was on, by the way, of course, was watching his offense. So here's his take on things.
We had some good pressure looks that we hadn't seen. That's always the first thing. You're trying to walk through a couple different things. And so on the fly, you're you're trying to sort through your protections, and that's kind of, that's realistic to a third down situation in a game. Teams spend a lot of time on trying to break down a protection. So I would say the pressure looks we got were challenging.
To say they were challenging kind of gives you an idea of how it went today for the Broncos offense. Today was a day for defense. The Broncos offense, by most accounts, most reasonable accounts, the Broncos offense did struggle against the 49ers defense. It's not completely surprising because we are still early enough in camp where the general rule of thumb, which is defenses are further ahead right now than offenses, still applies. But this is the $10,000 question surrounding the Denver Broncos this year. If they're going to be the team that Sean Payton thinks they are, many Broncos fans, national pundits think they're going to be, it's the offense. What are they going to do? And it certainly would appear that there were not a ton of highlights for the Broncos offense against the 49ers defense. Not totally unexpected. Not a reason to panic, I don't think. But this is the entire crux of the Broncos season. Okay, they have an elite defense. It will keep them in games. What is the offense going to do? Because the offense has to be better than it was a year ago. That's where the growth comes in for the Denver Broncos. And Bo Nix, even though he is more comfortable, even though things come a little bit more naturally to him, there's still going to be, and I think early in the season, you're going to see this because the Broncos do go up against a few pretty good defenses early on in the year. Bo knows what he's supposed to do. Bo knows the play calls and all that kind of stuff. Now it's, can he take what he sees from the defense and change things up? Audible, read the defense. Can he do that kind of stuff? Because defenses now know Bo Nix's tendencies, his strengths, his weaknesses better than they did at this point last year. So they're going to do some things based on what they saw for 17 games, 18 games, including the playoff game last year. Can Bo Nix decipher those things? He has a better comprehension of what's available to him in terms of the playbook. But how much is he learning opposing defenses, especially an unfamiliar one? Right? The 49ers, if they were having a joint practice today against the Kansas City Chiefs or the Vegas Raiders, maybe expectations could be a little bit higher because Bo Nix has seen those schemes and those defenses. He's going in with far less intel. So it's an unfamiliar defense that he's going up against. And you look too at some of the opponents on the schedule this year, they're going to be unfamiliar opponents. And I think you will see at times the Broncos offense struggle a little bit with Bo Nix kind of being their eyes to be able to read things. So I think in many ways, today's joint practice I don't want to say is predictive of the upcoming season necessarily, but it is a lot of what I read and heard today out of California. I'm like, I feel like that we're going to hear and read a lot of that stuff as the season goes on. Here's Sean Payton specifically talking about Bo Nix and how he handled things today in the joint practice.
Overall, listen, I think we had good tempo. I thought we did some good things in the running game. You get a chance in a situation like that. It's not tackle, but you get a chance to see some of the spontaneous plays that, he's able to make. And so, we'll go back and look, with a little bit tighter lens at everything.
And that's going to be the great equalizer, what Sean Payton mentioned there for Bo Nix. And it feeds into kind of the conversations we've been having over the last few days as it pertains to Bo Nix. Sean Payton didn't choose Bo Nix because of his improvisational skills, because of those spontaneous plays that he can make. But they appeared. They existed last year. You saw Bo Nix use his legs. You saw or heard Sean Payton remark how Bo Nix is faster. To me, that's going to be the entire key for Bo Nix in year 2 and beyond. How good is this stuff really? How much of a weapon can this be? Because his peers, the guys he's going to be now measured against year in and year out, have that ability. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, these are guys that have that spontaneity to their game. Last year, because Bo Nix was a rookie, everything was very controlled. They didn't like spontaneous. But once in a while, something would open up and Bo Nix would get out and run a little bit. I don't think Sean Payton likes it, but it's there. And there are going to be times this season where that spontaneity that Bo Nix has, however much of it exists, the Broncos are going to need it. And that's what I just keep going back to. I don't know, nor does anybody, what Bo Nix is actually going to be. But if he's going to be more than what he was projected to be coming out of Oregon, it's those situations where he's going to make up the difference. If Sean Payton didn't realize how fast Bo Nix is, perhaps that is the weapon that he can use, especially early in his career. And you got to be smart about it, right? Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, we've had these conversations about them. You got to be smart about it, but Sean McDermott, John Harbaugh, they'd be insane not to allow Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson to use those tools in their tool belt at times. And I think Sean Payton's in the same boat. I think and I don't know that Drew Brees had this. He's got to let Bo Nix do it. And if he has not just more than maybe Sean Payton or many people, including me, thought he had, but if he has a lot of it, a lot of the playmaking ability with his legs, then it will help him against, these unfamiliar defenses that have done perhaps more, just as much homework, if not more, on him than he has on them. So a lot of this today, I just feel like plays perfectly into the storylines that we're going to have throughout this season with the Denver Broncos. We know what Sean Payton likes about Bo Nix. We know he's going to enhance that. and we know he's going to do a lot to help Bo Nix against defenses here in year 2, but there's still going to be that little bit where it's going to be ultimately on Bo Nix to make plays for the Denver Broncos, especially on those third down situations. I think more than we saw last year is going to be required. Now, up next is the preseason game on Saturday. Probably won't see as much of Bo Nix and the starters as the people who are out there in California today saw, but Sean Payton once again reiterating that you will see them on Saturday night.
There's a lot of competition for spots. We discussed the other night, how we're going to play the game. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Our starters will play. There'll be a point at which we get into phase 2. And when you're in these phases, there's still a rotation, and so if you're looking at 3 interior defensive linemen in phase 2, there might be 4 or 5 ready to play in that phase 2. And then the same way when you get into phase 3, and we'll rotate that around. So it's, it's a body of work thing in evaluating it all.
Obviously, how much Bo Nix plays is going to be one of the biggest question marks going into Saturday. I don't know if what Sean Payton saw from him today is going to alter that plan. But I think it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem. Because on one hand, he has a quarterback who so far has performed. He's helped lead the Denver Broncos to the playoffs. And there's enough there that the Broncos want to see more, and enough there that the Broncos believe there's more to raise their ceiling, to get them to go even further than they did the year before. You got to protect that guy. But that guy also is a second-year quarterback who is still learning. And I know quarterbacks, even Tom Brady was learning late in his career, but the bulk of the learning happens within the first 3 years of a quarterback's career. So you need Bo Nix on the field. You need him to see a defense reacting in game action to what he does and allow him to react. So I think the only thing I'm willing to say as far as a prediction for Saturday is I don't think it's going to be. I think maybe he gets out on the field for 2 drives. I don't know how confident I am in that, but it's kind of a feeling. Because there's more development, there's more learning that's going on, and this is another opportunity for you to do it. And clearly Sean Payton does take the preseason seriously, does put value in it. I think Bo Nix needs some time. Maybe it'll be just a drive. I would say if the Broncos are 3-and-out on their first drive, I wouldn't be shocked to see Bo Nix back out on the field for the second drive. If the Broncos can string together a few plays, get a couple of first downs, then perhaps it would be just one series or one possession for Bo Nix. But he needs this time. But you also have to be mindful of how important this guy is to your chances coming up this season, especially given what he showed you last year. 719-247-1313. Told you we're going to run through the divisions in the NFL order of finish. So let's do that. And what better place to start than the AFC and the AFC West? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Never too early to start to look at these divisions now that the offseason is truly behind us and we're building towards the regular season in the NFL. Spent some time today looking through these divisions, kind of getting my feeling in for where these teams are going to finish. These are subject to change because I have to bring that up because, unfortunately for the Chargers, Rashawn Slater had to be carted off of practice. Now, you don't want to panic because our first player carted off the field during training camp was Justin Fields, and it turned out that he, sprained his toe or something like that, and people were panicking over Justin Fields, but Rashawn Slater having to be carted off of practice with the Chargers. And obviously, not only is he a significant player to the Chargers, but because he is that, he is also a significant player in the AFC West. And the perspective on what the Chargers can be could change a little bit if they are without their best offensive lineman. So we'll see if there are any reports on the status of Rashawn Slater. Well, let's go with that. Whatever it is, he will be good to go for the upcoming season. And let's look first in the AFC West, how it stacks up. And I think you look at this division overall, and there is no doubt that the rest of the division is catching up to Kansas City. And I do think it's reasonable to say that the Chiefs' days being atop of that division, which they have been for more than a decade now, are numbered. I don't see that it comes to an end this year. The Chiefs won the division last year by 4 games. That's winning a division by a mile. The one thing I'll say that will not continue for the Kansas City Chiefs, if they are in as many one-score games as they were last year, they're not going to have that ridiculous of a record. So I think it's reasonable to say that the Chiefs will lose some more of those one-score games. But I also think there's just as much reason to think that fewer of the Chiefs' games this year are going to come down to one score. I think this Chiefs offense is going to look better than it did a year before. We don't know what the suspension is going to be like for Rashee Rice, but even if it is fairly severe, the Chiefs are still going to have him for the majority of the season. The wide receiving core is healthier. They have done work on the offensive line to rebuild that to an extent, and I think that Patrick Mahomes certainly is motivated because there are a lot of people that were talking a lot last year, have talked a lot this offseason. I think overall it will be a bounce-back year from the Chiefs' offense, and the Chiefs' defense is one of the best in the NFL. So even if you want to shave a couple of games off of the Chiefs' record last year, which I think is prudent, I think you got to do that. The idea that the Chiefs are going to win this division by 4 games, there's no way. There's no way with the improvements that the other 3 teams in the division have made, some of the other teams on their schedule. But even if you take 2 wins away from Kansas City, you would have to give 2 more wins to the Chargers or 3 more wins to Denver in order to arrive at a conclusion that the Chiefs aren't going to win the division. And I'm not ready to do that right now. I think their record isn't as good as was last year, but it's still good enough to win the division. Barring some catastrophic news regarding Rashawn Slater, I think that the Chargers are the second best team in this division. If you just look at if it's between the Chargers and the Broncos, which I think it is for the preeminent threat to the Chiefs in the AFC West for second place, however you want to phrase it, what were the two main differences between the Chargers and the Broncos last year in their two meetings? Chargers running backs, Chargers quarterback. Herbert was better than Nix, and the Chargers running backs, coincidentally one of them being J.K. Dobbins, were able to run the ball effectively against the Denver Broncos defense. The Chargers running backs, their running back room, you wonder why J.K. Dobbins was available? Chargers got better. They got Amarion Hampton and they got Najee Harris. And Jim Harbaugh even said that Najee Harris has developed a sophisticated form of echolocation. Najee Harris is basically a bat now. Jim Harbaugh says some really weird stuff, doesn't he? But I like the backfield. I'm not out on Herbert. That defense is very good. If Rashawn Slater is okay and good to go for the season, and everybody touts Sean Payton, and for good reason. Chargers have Jim Harbaugh. Right? This is not the Chargers of old. Right? If you don't think that Sean Payton is going to let the Broncos backslide, then why would Jim Harbaugh allow the Chargers to do that? So I think LA is still the biggest threat to Kansas City. I think they'll make more of a run for the division than they did last year. Because I just think simply, if for no other reason, Kansas City just cannot win as many one-score games like they did last year. So I think the Chargers finish second ultimately, but that AFC West battle comes down to the wire. I think Denver slots in at third again with about the same record as they had last year. I've been on record to say 9-8. That's where I think they'll be, which is one game worse than they were last year. But I think they finished third. I think the team that is going to show the most improvement has to be the Raiders, though. I mean, Geno Smith, say what you will about Geno. He is infinitely more competent at that position than his predecessors are, or were, to be more accurate. So they're going to get more competent quarterback play. I may not think that Ashton Genty is the second coming of Jim Brown, but he's going to be a good running back, running behind a good offensive line. Max Crosby is a game wrecker. I think that the Raiders are going to pick off. They're going to be one of those teams that will look back at the end of the season and say they improved on the last season the most, among the most of any team in the NFL. And I think some of those wins that they're going to add to their win total will come at the expense of other AFC West teams, including the Chargers, including the Denver Broncos. I don't think ultimately the Raiders in year one with Pete Carroll have enough to be anything more than the fourth place team in this division. But given how we all collectively feel about the division, there's no shame in it. And I think that the Raiders will be able to do enough this season to really make their fan base feel good about the direction that they're going in. But Kansas City, LA, Denver, Vegas, records may change a little bit. It'll be tighter at the top of the division than it was last year, but ultimately it finishes with the same order of finish as it did last year. Of course, my thoughts on the AFC West more expansive than some of these other divisions. So we'll take a break, come back, and run down the rest of the AFC. And I welcome your thoughts. We're not getting into record. We'll get to that when the season rolls around. But right now, just how do you see these divisions stacking up? I got Kansas City, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, the order of finish in the AFC. We'll run down the rest of the AFC coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. What's your gut feel for the upcoming season? How these teams are going to finish in their respective divisions? Just went over my thoughts on the AFC West. It will look different along the way, but ultimately we will end up in the same place. Kansas City on top, Chargers second, Broncos third, and the Raiders fourth. But let's peruse what else is going to happen, or at least the way I see it, in the rest of the AFC. Let's go to the South, shall we? Don't want to spend a ton of time in this division because it's not a great division. It is not. I'm not out on the Texans yet. I think a lot of people are bailing on Houston, and we do this. Houston was a team last year that a lot of people got behind as kind of the darlings. They're up and coming, maybe the biggest threat to Kansas City in the AFC, like that kind of talk went around. They did not pay off some of that talk, and that causes people to just say, well, I'm done with them. I think you got to hang on with Houston. I think C.J. Stroud bounces back. Really like the pass rush and the defense overall from the Houston Texans, led by D'Amico Ryans as the head coach. I will say that I don't think a lot of people are bailing on Houston winning that division. More the bailing is going on like Houston's not going to be a factor when it comes to the playoffs. I think plenty of people are still like, yeah, probably Houston. And that, I guess it's all in just the way you frame it. I still think Houston is a good team. And I think they can win a better division than the one they are in. But I think a lot of people almost give Houston the division by default because the rest of the division is so poor. And I don't think either is particularly wrong. I think two things can be true. I think Houston can hold up well in a different division, but they also very much take advantage of a bad division. So I got Houston on top. I think Jacksonville makes the biggest move in this division. Liam Cohen, the work he did with Baker Mayfield, I think he will resuscitate Trevor Lawrence. Maybe the day has gone where we'll ever look at Trevor Lawrence the same way that we looked at him coming out of Clemson and after he rallied against the Chargers in his first playoff game. Maybe he's never going to be that guy, but he's better than this. I believe that. And cringy press conferences aside, and I actually kind of think that having a cringy press conference might actually bode well. Right? Nick Sirianni was being mocked openly after his opening press conference. It wasn't a press conference with it must be something with Philadelphia guys. Because I'm blanking on his name, but Arizona's head coach now. He had that really weird, did you ride the bus? Do you got that fire in your belly? Like it wasn't a great first impression. And I think Arizona is an interesting team this year. So I think Liam Cohen's Duval may actually bode well. But I think, regardless of anything else, I do think that he's good with quarterbacks. I think he'll be good with Trevor Lawrence. We know that Travis is going to be at Trevor's disposal more often than not this year. I think Jacksonville offensively will be improved. The problem is their defense is terrible. And if they're not going to maximize Travis Hunter on that side of the football, No reason to think it's going to get much better. This is not a great football team. This is not a playoff football team. But I think Jacksonville moves up the pecking order this year and finishes second behind Houston. But Houston might roll. Houston might win this division by 3 or 4 games. I got the Colts next in third. I think Shane Steichen deserves more credit because that Colts team is utterly devoid of talent at so many spots. And had it not been for Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball at the goal line against the Denver Broncos, we might be talking about Indy as a playoff team. But that game went south after that, and so did the Colts' chances of making the playoffs. Like Shane Steichen a lot. Still like Jonathan Taylor. This quarterback competition is rough. And you'll be able to see it tonight. I'm going to watch it. Anthony Richardson against Daniel Jones. I don't know how they can't start Anthony Richardson. I mean, what good does it do the Indianapolis Colts to eke out? If they think that Daniel Jones is capable of winning them one more game than Anthony Richardson is at this point, what does that get them? I think if you're going to go down in flames, you go down in flames with the guy that you drafted very high. I'm not a big believer in Anthony Richardson, but I think it's the route that the Colts have to go. And I also don't think it's not like they have this accomplished veteran like with the Giants, for instance. I know the way you feel about Russell Wilson, and I share in that. But he's a veteran. Right? There's a level of competency there that I just don't think Daniel Jones has. So it's not like you're turning to that kind of a veteran. I don't even think that the Colts have the type of veteran that Cleveland does to turn to at the beginning of the season in Joe Flacco. Coincidentally, they used to have Joe Flacco. I think you got to start Anthony Richardson. But boy, if he can't beat out Danny Dimes, then that is a wrap. But I think that the Colts, regardless of which direction they go in this quarterback competition, I just think they're not. I'm kind of buying a little bit into Jacksonville. Houston's far too good. I just don't see how Indianapolis can really be a factor in this division. Maybe they'll battle a little bit with Jacksonville for that second spot, but this is just not a very good football team, and they have a really bad quarterbacking situation. Arguably the worst in the NFL. So I think they finished third. The only thing that is saving them is I think Tennessee. I think Cam Ward's going to struggle. I do, and I said this going into the draft. The rookie, if you have your eyes on playing a rookie week 1, the play is Shador. That gives you not Jackson Dart, not Cam Ward. Day 1, I think that Shador Sanders is more capable or was going to be more capable than Cam Ward or Jackson Dart. That doesn't mean over the long term that would be the case, because I do like the upside of Cam Ward. But he has a propensity to hang on to the ball too long. And in the NFL, he's going to find out, especially early on, look who his opponent is week 1. I think the Broncos are going to feast on Tennessee in week 1. And I think Cam Ward is going to have a rough go of it the first part of this season, and I would not be shocked if Brian Callahan is the first head coach fired this season. I think it is going to be very bad in Tennessee this year. Very bad. And I guess you just hope that Cam Ward can kind of shake all of this off and that it's not so bad that it gives Cam Ward no chance to have a good NFL career. I think their defense is decent. Their offense is horrible. And I think Cam Ward throwing him week one, I don't blame them because who else are you going to go with? Like, they don't even have Danny Dimes to turn to. But Cam Ward is going to get eaten alive right out of the gate. I think it's going to turn ugly very quickly for Tennessee, and I think they finish at the bottom of the AFC South, and they may be the worst team in football this year. Let's see. I'm going to take a break here. So went through the AFC South, AFC West, still got the North in the East, and then the NFC as well. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll step away from the divisions for a minute so you can hear from Broncos quarterback Bo Nix. How did he think today's joint practice against the Niners went? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Appreciate you tuning in on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you want to drop a comment while you're there, feel free. It'll work just like if you wanted to call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. The sense that I have gotten coming from various reports out of California are that the defenses for both the 49ers and the Denver Broncos got the better of their offensive counterparts, and that the Broncos defense looks much better than the 49ers defense. Kind of seems like the big takeaways. We'll see what Bo Nix has to say about all of this. Here was the Broncos quarterback after today's joint practice.
I thought it was great. A respectful defense. They've been really good for a long time now. New DC, but they didn't really change much, and they go back with a lot of good players. pieces together. We have a really good old line that's going to, set the foundations, and we got backs that can run and move the football. So I'm excited. Thank you.
That was Broncos quarterback Bo Nix after today's joint practice. Had some moments here and there, according to reports. But overall, the 49ers defense, as you would expect, ahead of the Broncos offense. And I mentioned this to start the show. Like, Bo Nix is not suffering from a lack of self-awareness. He understands that he is still young in the NFL. There's still more room for him to grow, more things for him to learn. And that's going to be the big question this year. He knows what the Broncos side of things, he's got that down. But now, how does he have the opponent down to where he can figure them out? And that'll be the question this year. As far as the running back room goes, that will be obviously one of the big things to watch out for on Saturday in the preseason game, is how those reps are going to be split. I would say not a lot of J.K. Dobbins. But then how is Sean Payton going to divvy out the reps between McLaughlin, Estime, and R.J. Harvey? There will be others that will play in the game, obviously, but that is probably the most significant position battle going on with the Denver Broncos. I think it's not always this way, but usually the better teams don't have a lot of training camp battles for significant spots, significant roles. Like, a lot of those are already spoken for. The Broncos don't have a lot of them. Now, who's after, Sutton and Mims, who's that third wide receiver? I think right now it's clearly Devon Vele. And then after that, how worried are you? How interested are you on who the fourth and fifth wide receiver are going to be? I think Vele is a little bit vulnerable as the third wide receiver. Troy Franklin has been someone talked about a lot. People really seem to like Pat Bryant as a rookie. But I think it will come down to Franklin or Vele, and I would say it's more probable than not that Vele is that third guy. There are some comparisons to Tim Patrick, and the Broncos really liked what they had in Tim Patrick. And Sean Payton likes wide receivers like Tim Patrick. He's had a few that fit kind of that mold, and Devon Vele does. But you throw Evan Ingram into the mix, you expect the Broncos to run the ball more effectively. All of a sudden, do you really worry that much about wide receiver 3, 4, 5? I don't think that you do. You look at the defensive side. Not a lot of upward mobility there. Maybe some questions. Well, with Drew Sanders getting hurt, I mean, the depth at that position changes a little bit, but it's going to be Singleton and Greenlaw, who they're taking it very easy with. They don't want to rush him back, nor should they. The cornerback room, can Barron seize that third corner role, whether that means he's going to play outside or inside at the slot? Can he grab that spot over a guy in Jacon McMillan that got a lot of time there last year? So there are little spots here and there, but really running back is the big one. And with Dobbins, I expect to, as Sean Payne said, the starters are going to play. Okay, I would say that Dobbins, regardless of how quickly the Broncos offense gets off the field after their first drive, I don't think Dobbins will be back out there for the second time. This is a running back that has a history of injuries. He is a veteran. There's no need to play J.K. Dobbins. He might just get like a carry and then that be a wrap. But then it gets interesting with how McLaughlin, you know how they're going to use him. I keep going back to R.J. Harvey, Audric Estime. That's what I want to see. J.K. Dobbins is the number one guy. Jaleel McLaughlin has a clearly defined role where he's going to get his touches, and it's a certain number of touches. But then who is that third guy going to be? So Estime versus R.J. Harvey, if you want to phrase it that way, is probably one of the biggest things I'm looking out for on Saturday. And then just across the board, the rookies, but also the second-year players, Bo Nix being one of them. How much more settled and overall better do the second-year players look than they did maybe at this time a year ago? And there's a lot of guys in that group, including Audric Estime. Jonah Ellis is another player. If I identified individuals, Jonah Ellis is one I'm really interested to see on Saturday. So I don't think these Broncos preseason games, even though we kind of knew it was going to be Bo Nix to start, there was still a level of intrigue around the quarterback position when they opened the preseason last year. There's not that this year. And you go up and down the roster, there's not a lot of intrigue around this about spots and the depth chart. But there are a few players that you're interested in seeing how they look in whatever time they get on Saturday, including Bo Nix, of course. 719-247-1313. What are you looking forward to, or who are you looking forward to watching on Saturday night as the Broncos play their first preseason game against the 49ers? Take your thoughts on that and get back into the divisions. Little bit I have changing from one year to the next in the AFC South, not so much in the AFC West. How about the East and the North? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. NFL preseason begins tonight in earnest. We did have a Hall of Fame game, but one game coming up at the top of the hour. There are a few intriguing storylines if you want to watch some preseason football this evening. I'll get to those here in just a little bit. For now, I want to finish up the AFC, kind of where I'm at right now in terms of how I think these divisions are going to stack up this year. In the AFC West, I think we take perhaps a more circuitous route to the same result. Kansas City 1, Chargers 2, Broncos 3, and the Raiders 4. In the South, I think that there will be a little bit of a change, not at the top with Houston, but I think Jacksonville will be improved. And I think this quarterbacking situation for the Indianapolis Colts is I'll say dire, to say the least. I think those two teams may end up flip-flopping, and then I don't expect Cam Ward in year one to look anywhere close to where Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels did in year one. Tennessee finishes at the bottom of that division. To the north, which I think the AFC West is the most interesting division top to bottom. You have a collection of coaching talent that no other division has, that we've never seen in a division so far, with Reed, Harbaugh, Peyton, and Carroll now. But the AFC North still has something about it. And I think that all four teams in the division are worth keeping an eye on for different reasons. Not because all four of them are good, but because all four of them have a little something that's worth at least keeping track of. The team at the top is not going to be a surprise to you. It's Baltimore. And I think one thing that goes a little bit underreported, especially about Baltimore, Kansas City's in this same boat. I don't think people realize how young a lot of the personnel on these two teams were last year. Baltimore, because we fixate on Lamar, of course, and Zay Flowers and Andrews and Kyle Hamilton and Derrick Henry and so on and so forth, which is important, right? You have tried and true veteran productive players at some of the most important positions, but the Ravens filled in a lot of blanks, so to speak, with very young players. You got to believe at least a few of them are going to be improved from where they were a year ago, but I don't see it from anybody in this division to say, oh, Baltimore's not going to win the division. I think they have a stranglehold on this thing, and it's going to continue this year. The story is not at the top, not at the bottom. It's these middle two. Because you look at Cincinnati and you say their defense can't be worse than it was last year. Like, that's just not possible. But yet, who are the people that they're battling with in terms of the contract? Defensive players, their best defensive player. And just for good measure, they've also been fighting with Shamar Stewart, who was their top draft pick, that if the Hendrickson thing went awry like it has, you would go, oh, well, at least they have Shamar Stewart. Don't like him as much as Hendrickson, but they got another one, and they're messing with both of those guys. I still can't fathom Cincinnati's defense being as bad as they were last year. And as we get closer to the regular season, and this applies to McLaurin and Parsons and Hendrickson, that's the biggest deadline of them all. It's not the start of training camp. It's not anything else. The start of the season, are these guys actually willing to forfeit game checks to try and win their battle with their respective teams. Until I see I don't see Trey Hendrickson on the field for week 1 for Cincinnati, I think Cincinnati's defense is going to be improved. I like the pick of Shamar Stewart. And one thing I guess I'm more confident in Cincinnati, the aspect of them that I'm more confident in as opposed to the defense being better. They're going to start this season better. They will. They start at Cleveland, home against Jacksonville. Then they have back-to-back road games, Minnesota and Denver. I think 3-1 is not a possibility. It's a probability. One of the big issues with Cincinnati, in addition to their defense, are their slow starts. Zach Taylor's playing Joe Burrow and the main guys tonight to try in the preseason to try and get them more ready. I don't know if that's really what the issue is, but I don't blame Zach Taylor for trying it. I think Cincinnati gets out of the gate faster, and that will make everything for them. They get out of the gate faster. Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. Their offense is going to score 8 billion points. Their defense only has to be a skosh better than they were last year, and this Cincinnati team is going to get double-digit wins. I think they finish second behind Baltimore. In third, it's Pittsburgh. I feel like there's a trade-off here, like they're getting better at one spot, but they're using a different spot to, like the trade with Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's like they're getting better at one spot, but then they're leaving themselves worse at another. And in the aggregate, I don't know how much better they are. They bring in DK Metcalf, which I like, but they send out George Pickens, which I can kind of understand, but then it leaves your offense a little bit lopsided. Some talk about Roman Wilson. I don't think that Pittsburgh's in any danger of snapping their streak of wins. And if what I think will go right for Cincinnati doesn't go right, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will be right there. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to flash enough. I think he is going to have a better end to his career than we thought he was going to, given how the last 2 years have gone. I think Pittsburgh is a double-digit win team, and they'll be waiting there. If Cincinnati figures out the start of the season and their defense is just, like, I can't stress this enough, a degree better, I think Cincinnati's better than Pittsburgh. But if it doesn't work with Cincinnati, I think Pittsburgh's right there to finish behind Baltimore. But I'll stick with Cincinnati for the second spot in the AFC North. Go Pittsburgh, and then clearly Cleveland will be at the bottom. It's just Shador. When are they going to play him? How does he look? This is a team that's going to be in the mix for a quarterback. It may not be Arch Manning because Grandpa Archie says Arch isn't coming out. I'll believe that when I see it. If he leads the Longhorns to the national championship game, I think Arch is coming out. But maybe it's Nussmeier from LSU. Maybe if you're a Browns fan, keep one eye on Saturdays on Penn State. But they got to get Shador on the field. And just see what they have. I understand why they start Flacco to begin the year. See if they can catch lightning in a bottle. When they inevitably don't, then find a soft landing spot, if you can, for Shador Sanders and see what he's got. And then measure it against what you think one of these college quarterbacks are going to be. Now, I say that, and I think it all makes a whole lot of sense. This is the Cleveland Browns. It could be absolute chaos. It could be Dylan Gabriel starting week 1. I wouldn't put anything past that organization. But it seems like it's Flacco to start, find the soft landing spot for Shador, and go. And what's funny about all of this is if you put anything into the idea that the Browns and the NFL in general were trying to put Shador in his place, or maybe more accurately, put Shador's dad in his place and send some kind of a message like, you're going to have to start from the bottom here. And we're sitting here on the eve of the Browns' first preseason game, and what's the biggest story? It's Shador. Not even close. There's not even anyone else that anyone is talking about. So Shador is the biggest thing going on right now with the Cleveland Browns. As much as they maybe try to tamp that down, Shador's still the biggest star. And he'll start the preseason game tomorrow night against Carolina. But him, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco, Vinny Testaverde, Jameis Winston, Tim Couch, it don't matter. The Browns are the worst team in that division, and they will finish as such in 4th. Now, the East at the top, again, another division, nothing to see here. Buffalo is going to roll in the AFC East, and they would be I need to look up these odds. They usually post odds for the last unbeaten team in the NFL. If I were going to bet on that, I bet on Buffalo. I don't know if they're the favorite. I got to imagine they would be. Like, I was looking at Buffalo's schedule today. I don't really go game by game when I'm figuring these things out. It's just more of a general sense. Okay, I think they'll have a couple wins here. Maybe they get to 4 or 5 before the bye week. That kind of stuff. It's more of an overview than game by game. But it stuck out to me what Buffalo has. So Baltimore, that game's going to be really interesting out of the gate. Then they have the Jets, the Dolphins, the Saints, the Patriots, the Falcons. Then they get Carolina after the bye week. Then a big game against Kansas City. Then it's back to Miami. They get Tampa at home. Houston, that's interesting. At Pittsburgh, it gets more interesting after about week 10. But considering they get Kansas City and Baltimore at home, I mean, they could be 10-0. And not because they're pushing to go 10-0. I mean, the only games that the Bills really care about in the first 10 games of the season, 11 weeks of the season with their bye week, are Baltimore and Kansas City. But they're just so much better than these other teams on their schedule. I think Buffalo is going to, if they can get past Baltimore, watch them be like at least 9-0. I think they probably beat Kansas City at home to be 10-0. Gets a little bit interesting there. We'll be on, Miami 72 Dolphins, not quite 72 Dolphins watch, but we'll be having those conversations a little bit. And then it gets a little bit more complicated, a little bit tougher for them. But, man, I think Buffalo, they got Baltimore and Kansas City at home. Everybody else, they're absolutely going to roll. So they won the division by 5 games last year. I think they're going to do about the same thing. I think the road to the Super Bowl is going through Buffalo. I'll say that on August 7th. I think Buffalo has home field advantage. I think they're the 1 seed. But after that, I don't love any of the other 3 teams in that division. But I think they're interesting. A lot of people like New England. And I'm a big Vrabel guy. Big Vrabel guy. And I think he's going to get some stuff right with this team right away. And we've seen him before when he was with Tennessee win some games because of his coaching. There aren't a lot of coaches that you really look at in the NFL that you say win games. I think Vrabel's one of those guys. He's not Andy Reid. He's not Sean Payton, etc. But he knows when to roll the dice. I do think New England is going to be better this year. Drake May all the way now. I don't love their talent, though. That's kind of my big issue. Like, I don't want to fully get behind New England, but there's so many things that the Patriots have that I like, including Mike Vrabel. And I think Drake May's good, or can be good. And he's got Josh McDaniels. Say what you will about Joshy. When he has offensive coordinator next to his name, he's really good. I think I'll go New England second. But I think any of the three teams after Buffalo have a chance to finish second in the division. We forget how much individual talent the Jets have. I think they have an opportunity to maybe finish second. And Miami would be the obvious one to go to. They might be on the verge of collapse. I like Mike McDaniel, but every day that goes by, he's just looking at one of those guys that can't make that move one seat over. Right? And right now, the Dolphins are in a little bit of a crisis mode right here. I don't know if Mike McDaniel is the right guy to manage that crisis. I like him so much. And his comments the other day about it being a great day, and somebody asked him why, because we're another day closer to dying, like kind of a dark humor, I suppose. I love it. The whole Mike McDaniel shtick, I'm all about it. But this team with Tua and where they've been trending, and the fact that they have just gotten destroyed by anybody worth anything in the NFL. Like Buffalo kills them. Kansas City has killed them. I don't know what Mike McDaniel's future is. And I know the ownership in Miami. I think Brian Callahan is the coach that might be the first fired. I wouldn't be shocked if Mike McDaniel stumbles out of the gate and he's gone. As much as I like him, but he very much seems like he's an offensive coordinator. Miami could end up second in that division, but they could also be last. It could go that bad. But I will go Buffalo. I'll go New England. I'd like to see Drake May in the preseason. Like to confirm it. This is the division which I may alter between now and the start of the season based on what I see in the preseason. But I'll go Buffalo 1, New England 2, Miami 3, and the Jets in 4th. So not a lot changing in the AFC. Little stories here and there, but the big dogs, still the big dogs. The divisions all finish the same. And then you're looking at, I looked at a group of Cincinnati, LA, Pittsburgh, Denver battling for those wild card spots, with New England kind of being a dark horse in there, depending on especially their division, right? Does Miami hold it together for one more year? I think then maybe the East doesn't get a wild card team. But that's kind of the way I see it. I'll take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. hour. So I'll say real preseason football kicks off at the top of the hour as opposed to the fake preseason football, which is the Hall of Fame game. But all of this obviously precedes real football, which we're still like a month away from. But there are some interesting storylines outside of the Denver Broncos. And I would actually say that the Broncos have graduated from preseason interest. I mean, not to say that there's nothing to be interested in when it comes to the Broncos preseason, because I'm not saying that. There is. But the Broncos are in a good enough spot that the preseason just kind of feels like, well, it's what we have for now until we get to the real thing, because the Broncos, what their season is going to be about is the regular season. They don't have a ton to figure out. They have work to do, certainly, and they're going to use this time. But you look at some of the teams that are playing tonight, they got some things to figure out, more so than the Broncos. This game that kicks off at the top of the hour, Colts-Ravens. Ravens, nothing to see here. Fast forward to the regular season. Colts, lot to see. Danny Dimes and Anthony Richardson. How is that going to shake out? And I said this earlier. I don't know how, given there's no way that either quarterback is going to make the Colts the best team in the division. You're going to have to be the best team in the AFC South to get into the playoffs. So what justification is there for not ultimately starting Anthony Richardson? This Danny Dimes stuff, I think it's already somewhat of an indictment on Anthony Richardson that they feel like they have to bring someone in to push him, and it doesn't bode well for Richardson's future with the Indianapolis Colts. But for this season, it's got to be Richardson, right? But Danny Dimes versus Anthony Richardson. Also, that will be at the top of the hour. At 5:30, it'll be Cincinnati and Philadelphia. The only interesting thing about that game is that Cincinnati's actually playing their starters as Zach Taylor looks to try and figure out why in the world the Bengals always start the season so poorly. I will say, if he follows through with this plan, and I think that if he continues to do it and doesn't just play him tonight and then decide, you know what, not worth it. If he follows through with the plan, with the way I think the Bengals will start the season, the first 4 games, I think they have a real chance at being 3-1. This is going to be a big win for preseason football. Be a big get for preseason football. As much as everybody has found every reason to minimize it, to delegitimize it, to say it doesn't matter, if the Bengals go from a team that doesn't play their main guys during the preseason and a team that starts slow to a team that plays their guys in the preseason and starts fast, big get for preseason football. But that's the one thing to watch. So I guess you could, if I were setting up your viewing guide, if you had the ability to watch all these games, you watch Colts for as long as they have either Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson in there, and then maybe you flip over for the beginning to see Joe Burrow, and then you can flip back to the Colts game, and then the late one tonight, which you can watch in its entirety if you so choose, Pete Carroll's and Geno Smith's return to Seattle. Ashton Genty. How does he look? How does all of this look for the Raiders? So that'll be the late game tonight, Raiders and Seahawks. Getting back to the Broncos in terms of the preseason, Brett with actually pretty good point. Given Sean Payton's history of listing rookies as last on the depth chart, RJ Harvey will be running behind me and you with 4 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. I do think that we will see RJ Harvey earlier than that. And Sean Payton will be able to, I guess, Sean Payton, well, look, he's not fooling anybody, right? Nobody that knows anything is getting duped by Sean Payton putting all the rookies at the bottom of the depth chart. Like, legit, I know, in talking to you, I know you know what Sean Payton is doing. Brent and anybody else listening, you know. But what Sean Payton can say Saturday is, look, I got to get RJ Harvey and the rookies. I got to get them reps. I got to let Bo Nix throw to them. I got to let them run behind, either our starting offensive line or our backup offensive line. I actually think that RJ Harvey might be, if J.K. Dobbins is going to start, first run play of the game goes to J.K. Dobbins. Second run play of the game might go to RJ Harvey. And Sean Payton can sit there at the podium and go, well, I just got to get him quality reps. Got to get all the rookies quality reps. But I do think you bring up a good point. I don't think the depth chart is necessarily going to hold up as the order of appearance on Saturday, because Sean Payton does value the preseason more than some of his colleagues. And I think he will look at it as a valuable opportunity to get RJ Harvey in there with good personnel around him. Because that's the thing. San Francisco is not going to play their guys. All indications out of San Fran, don't expect them to go with their ones. That was today. So who RJ Harvey and the other rookies are going against? Not the best and brightest that the San Francisco 49ers have to offer. But they could be playing with the best and brightest the Denver Broncos have on the offensive side of the football. 719-24-7, 1313. Top of the hour, we'll hit the three stories that are driving the show. Get back into today's joint practice between the 49ers and the Denver Broncos. Also, run through the NFC. Not much do I foresee changing in the AFC this year. How do I feel about the NFC division by division? We'll get into that. And a potentially big story in LA. It is not good news for Jim Harbaugh and company when it comes to their best offensive linemen. Get to that as well with what's driving the show after this on Extra Sports 1300.